Okay, so it's just past 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee Subcommittee for guidelines. And I will start with the roll. So I'll just go around my screen. So I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm here. Dee Ortner?
Here.
Dick Jameson?
Here.
Dean Banfield?
Here.
John Hickling?
Here.
Kathy Kukalo?
Here.
Lois Wassoff?
Here.
Mary Hartman?
Here.
Parashar Patel?
Here.
Wade Rubenstein?
Here.
Bill Swain?
Here.
And Ray Andrews?
Here.
Okay. I think I got everybody. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, so we don't have any minutes, so we're going to go right into the guidelines discussion. So as we talked about last time, tonight we'll vote a final guideline. So you should all be prepared for that. And I have a document that we'll all cross our fingers that I can share with you just to walk us through it. So let me.
Chris, I can put it up for you if you want.
I think, let me see here. I need my Zoom screen. Let's see, here we go. Share. Ta-da, look at this, amazing.
Very good.
Okay, I'm actually gonna take us a page up. If I can do that. Let's see, how do I make it go up? How do I do that? Let's see. It's not letting me move it. Okay, well, anyway, I'll walk through. So to update since we last met. So we had a couple of changes in the requests from the budget units. So CPS request was lowered from 42.6 to 41.8. So in their latest update to the school committee, the high schools requested an assessment. So the last time we just saw a total budget. So now we actually have an assessment of 21.4 million. And that's based on a budget that was lowered from about 35.9 million to 35.8. So not much of a change. The town request is unchanged since we last met at 29.1 million, and that reflects the adjustments that they had proposed that evening. The other changes that we had really affect the amounts available for guidelines. So this is some good news. So Carrie's estimates for FY22 local receipts, the revenue increased by 345,000. I believe she sent you an email on that this week. And in addition, the fixed costs that are outside the guideline but affect the amounts that are available for guidelines were reduced by 404,000 related to OPEB. And that had to do with the smoothing of expenses from 22 through 24. And again, Kerry sent out a note on that. So those are the changes since we last met. And those changes, if we reduce or would increase, I should say, the amount available for guidelines to, if we were to use it all, by 749,000. So not an insignificant amount. So that's the changes since last time. Any questions on the changes in either requests or amounts available for guidelines? And I have a little bit hard time because I've got my screen shared. So let me just make sure it's hard for me to see. So just yell out if anybody has any questions on that.
Chris, I had a question. This would be a Carrie question, was on the OPEB. And I was having a little trouble understanding the various columns of numbers that were put up, but Carrie, was making it look like we were cutting our contribution to OPEB. Is that right?
That is correct. So the last funding report that we had the original contribution for fiscal 22 of about 1.6, and then it started going down, and it went down fairly significantly fairly quickly. And then it came up again in the last couple of years of the funding schedule. And so rather than, from a budgetary point of view, it's much harder to manage big numbers moving around like that. I talked to the actuary, and he gave us a level dollar contribution that we could make each year that would still meet our original funding schedule and be much more predictable for the budget.
Okay. So we're not cutting it to plug the budget. We're cutting it because the actuary is saying, I'm going to try to give you a more predictable stream of payments to make that will still let you shave down the liability.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
Yes, Christine, Phil Swain. Does that change extend the time to when we'll be fully funded for OPEB, or is it the same schedule, just smoother payments?
It's the same schedule with smoother payments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
Christine, I had a question on the table here itself, or did you want to hold off?
Yeah, I
on
want to
that?
hold that. I'll get to that in 1 second, Parashar. So any other questions on changes that were made to the requests or what's available to guidelines?
I have a question. I'm Ray.
Yeah, hi, Ray.
Yeah. What was the thinking? Why was it originally high, then low, then high again for the OPEB contribution? I can see that, inflation or, inflation making it high towards the end, but why was it high in the beginning? Higher?
Well, the funding schedule was put together by the actuary based on several assumptions, and those assumptions produced an annual contribution that, in the first several years, the town has been funding OPEB since 2008 or 2009, and up until this current year, fiscal 21, those annual payments were increasing each year. But in fiscal 21, it went down significantly by $200,000. And I guess all I can say is it's what the actuary generated based on the set of assumptions that we're using.
Okay. Well, yeah, we have updated assumptions, so to speak, some of which are now facts and even history. Okay.
Okay, good. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to move to the chart now that's in front of you. So this is a simple chart, just trying to lay out what we've had for some historical guideline spending and sort of where we are now. And it also has a proposal for what we might do this evening. So I want to focus on the total line in the middle of that page, the total row. So it just shows what the spending for these three budget units was in FY20. It was a total of 88.1 million. In FY21, 89.2 million was approved. The preliminary guideline that we set would have raised spending to 91.3. At this point, so based on the latest requests from the three units, their requests total 92.3. So we're about $1 million apart from our preliminary guideline. As I mentioned earlier, through changes in those two elements, one local receipt estimates and the other the OPEB charge, we have about 749,000 more that could go to the guideline. So this proposal assumes that it does. So it takes that gap of $1 million and it backs off about 750,000 from it. And it leaves the tax increase, so the increase to the taxpayer, at about 2.5%. The total increase in the spending, which also has funding from new growth and from non-property tax revenues, would be a growth of 3.13%. and our final spending guideline would be 92.1. So it leaves a small gap, in my opinion, on a $90 million budget to what's been requested. But it does use what we were just provided with, an updated guideline availability. And it gets us, I think, to a reasonable place from the taxes and a growth in expenses. So that's what the proposal is. It doesn't result in any cuts in spending, right? It should be a reasonable amount for the towns and the schools. It's not everything they've asked for, but they're not done working on their budgets yet either. So there's still time for that to be adjusted. And I think it does keep us in a range we want to be. If you take a look at the percentage increase in the tax bill for 20 and 21 and our preliminary, which was at 2.5, we're in the range that we would like to be. We're not at the SGR. We're not at less than 1%, which is where inflation is, but we're in a reasonable place. And I think we do a pretty good job of closing the gap between ourselves and the budget units.
So I'm just going to ask. I think I'm kind of like queuing in on the stuff that Carrie sent out. I see the 3.13 number in her on the yellow line of the spreadsheet
Yes,
she sent
right.
out.
Yes.
Are these numbers for the operating budgets, and what's the relationship between that and the fixed cost components? The kind of healthcare and the insurance and all the pieces that are, because what we just did was we took pieces of local receipts, which are in that below the line set, and we kind of added them to the operating budget guideline, which is, I guess, fine, but what's the overall growth in the other fixed cost components? That's all. That's my question.
Yeah, Carrie can answer that. I don't know off the top of my head, Dean.
Yeah, just give me a minute. I have to go to that page.
Other questions? We'll come back to Dean's question.
Yeah, Chris, this is Parashar.
Yes.
If I'm to understand this correctly, the last time we looked at the fiscal 22 cost center request for all three groups there, it was 93.9 million, right? And so I'm now interpreting that to mean the 93.9 has come down to 92.3. Is that
That's
correct?
right. So that's right. So CPC, the CPS lowered their request by about 600,000,
Yep.
and the high school came down another 100,000. So those are the changes.
Okay. Well, and the town also appears to have come down 800,000.
No, that was already assumed when we met with them, Parashar. So they already had given that to us when we met with them.
Okay, fair enough. I was just looking at the P&G table. I was just looking at the picture, and that's what I was going off of.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And so one other question. So our fiscal year 22 final guideline in the email that Carrie sent out a couple of weeks ago was 89.245 million. And now
That was
we're suggesting it should be 92.1. Is that what we're saying?
No, I didn't follow what you just said. So our guideline was 91.3, right? So we gave about 2 million. So if the total spending was 89.2 in FY21, our guideline, I think, was 2,084,000, something like that.
Well,
So
maybe I
2 million more than
misinterpreted this email
89.2.
Carrie had sent where she attached screenshots of the two tables we were looking at. That's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And I see a table for fiscal year 21 budget. I see fiscal year 22 tentative guideline, and that's 91.288. And then I see fiscal year 22 final guideline.
I don't think she didn't know the final guideline, so I don't know what that is. The 91.288 is my 91.3 on this chart.
Okay, thank you. That's where I'm trying to clarify this. So
Yeah.
I should think 91.3 million is equal to 92.1.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So on that chart, Parashar, the final guideline, you can see it's not adding any increment. So it's just pulling the fiscal.
Oh, 000.
Yeah, it's not filled in.
Got it, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so then on fixed cost total fixed costs are only going up $281,000 or 1.07%. And,
Carrie, is that before the adjustment on OPEB?
that is as it stands now.
Okay, as it stands now.
Inclusive of the OPEB adjustment. It's also inclusive of an adjustment that we made to the retirement assessment, which we talked about at preliminary guidelines, where we have a new schedule of drawdown on our pension reserve now that we're getting to the end of that funding schedule. So really a very modest increase in fixed costs. Health insurance is up 4%. So that certainly is helping the budget picture for fiscal 22.
Are we taking the hit this year for the first time on the pension COLA increase?
We are not.
We're not.
It is not. It was not included in the pension assessment that was certified by the state.
Okay, so that'll come next year? Is that when that's going to first,
Yeah, I believe fiscal 23 is the first time we'll see that.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Carrie, does this put us at the levy limit?
We would still have significant unused levy capacity. If that, is that your question?
Yes. So what's our unused levy capacity?
So the unused levy capacity at your preliminary guideline was 4.55% or almost $4.5 million. Right now, inclusive of the 750,000, if you were to allocate that. Oh, my formula's not working. Back to another page.
But it's still around $4 million, Wade, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So
it's going to be 4.3 or,
Yeah. So it's
So if
ballpark.
If you were to fund all of the cost center requests, it would bring it down to 4.26, which is 4.2 million.
Carrie, can you tell us what it would be at the proposed 3.13% guideline? What the unused levy?
Yeah, so it would be the same as at the preliminary 4.55% or
Thank you.
or almost 4.5 million.
Good.
So Carrie, when I looked at your chart, it looked like we are eating into the levy limit by 288,000. Is that correct?
we're not going with that number, I don't think, Dick.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
If you did the full request, Dick, we would.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
The taxpayers would pay that 288 and we would get into the levy.
I think we're at the yellow line, Dick, if you're looking at that.
Yeah, that's my proposal, is the yellow line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which eats into the levy limit 0.
Correct. Okay. So what do people think? So if we, are there any other questions on it? So I think it would be good if we get a sense of where we are on it and figure out what other things we have to do to get there. So maybe we'll just do a little straw poll. It's not binding, just to say, just on this proposal. And there could be other proposals, but on the proposal that I put forward to see where we are. So I'm going to stop sharing it for a minute here so I can see everybody. Okay, so just by a show of hands, how many people are inclined to support what I put forward, which is the 2.5%, which means that the final guideline stays where we, from a percentage standpoint, stays at 2.5%, but includes now about 750,000 more. So we'd be up around 2.8 million in terms of a guideline increment. So I'm supporting that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm getting a lot of support for that. Okay, does somebody have a question? Somebody have a question? Ray, do you have a question or you was just support? No, okay. Okay. Are there,
I think
yeah.
I had a question, maybe
Yes.
Stephen, and unfortunately, no one from the schools here, but Stephen, I mean, 100,000 short plus or minus, I mean, is that reasonable from your perspective? I know you're still massaging the budget, but realistic? If there's a pain point, is there one or two pain points or no?
I think that, well, there are a lot of variables, but 100,000, yeah, I mean, are we going to shut it down and decide just not to show up tomorrow because we lost 100,000? Of course not. I think there are some things that still need to be worked out. It's possible the state budget could come in more favorably. Local receipts could come in. The governor just lifted guidelines on dining and things like that. I think people are going to be want to get out to eat, and could that affect local receipts to the tune of? I have no idea. This is the part we're going to be figuring out as we go, because
Right.
I have no idea. In 1918, I have no idea how this worked. So I think that's fine. Our commitment is, it has been and remains to try and meet the guideline as best we can. And I think the consideration given by the subcommittee here is greatly appreciated, and will make that a lot easier.
Okay, thank you.
And if your phone's at home just rang, it's because our police business lines are down, but 911 is still working.
Okay, good. Okay. So it looks like, and I'm not trying to, push the committee, so I'm open to other proposals, but if you're ready, certainly I would take a motion and then we can have discussion on it. My motion would be to raise the guideline to 2,793,693, which, as I described, is simply adding those two changes to guidelines available to the preliminary guideline that we had published a month ago or so.
And was the motion to also split it up the three ways that you showed?
We're going to talk about. We'll talk about that. Yeah, no, not yet. I'm just trying to get a motion to the. We can talk about it. I'm happy to do that now if you want. So all I did. No, that's fine. It's fine, Parashar. All I did just it ended up in my mind being simpler. But let me explain what I did in the proposal. So when I looked at
back up on the screen, Christine.
Sure. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me do
That's
that.
okay.
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Let me do it. Yeah. Sorry, I just can't. Here we go. Okay. So what I did was I just took a look at what the spread was. So as I said, the total requests for additional spending come in at $3 million. It's about $1 million per business unit. It's $1 million at the high school, $1 million at CPS, and $1 million at the town. And we have, if we go with this, about 2.7 million or 2.8 million to have for a guideline. So if everybody wanted $1 million, I just said, why don't we just split it? And so I divided the 2,793,693 three ways, and everybody gets about 930,000. So it was it just worked out because they were all pretty close in terms of the distance between the request and what we had for a guideline, that it made sense to me to do it that way.
So Chris, in fact, the high school really doesn't have to cut much from their request.
Correct.
And it's 100,000 from the town and the schools, right?
Right. That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. It's pretty close on all of them, for a $92 million budget. I think that, it's pretty close.
Right. And we go from a 2.8% estimated property tax increase to a more reasonable 2.5.
Correct.
Yep. I like this. I think this is more than reasonable.
I guess the only question I have is, could we spread it more in a more aligned way with the scale of the individual budgets? The CPS budget is literally twice that of CCRSD, but they're each getting,
But if you do that, Dean, you'll over allocate.
Of the found money, and yet the scale of their budget is significantly larger. So I just was wondering if we could think about that.
Well, I think we did talk about this last week, and the thing is that last year the town took quite a hit from their budget.
Right.
So we were hoping that this year we could make that up a little bit.
Fair enough.
Yep.
I am very sorry to have missed last week. That was my fault. So
We talked about this, Dean.
we talked about that.
Okay.
Christine,
So-
I got one question there
please.
too.
Yeah, sorry.
On a similar note to what Dean was mentioning, not to say to do it, but like, is there any way to back off from the town a little bit, knowing that they could potentially make it up, in local receipts? Like the schools can't really make up as much money as the town can. I believe
No.
that's true.
The school, it's interesting. It's the town has the potential for revenue, but so do the schools, right? So the schools have revenue outside of property tax. The high
Is it
school-
on the same scale though? I don't know the answer to that.
No, well, I mean,
Well,
it's a couple million bucks. So CPS has a couple million bucks in Chapter 70, and
Mhm.
the high school probably has
And-
something similar. But the high school also has E&D, so they're expecting about 1.7 million in reserves at the end of this year.
Okay, I wasn't thinking those types. Okay, so that does bring it
Yeah,
more. in
so
line.
I
wasn't-
think I did look at that to see if there was a big difference in terms of, I don't know what to write, sort of flexibility, to be able to do this. And I felt like all three parties, in the case of CPS, they don't have E&D, but they do have circuit breaker, and they probably are going to have, I think, some surplus this year. So I think they can make it work.
Sure.
As I look at those detailed budgets, I'm pretty comfortable they can.
Yeah, Chris, this is Dee, and at the meeting the other night, the school committee meeting the other night, I got the impression that I believe their numbers are going to continue to go down a bit.
Mhm.
Not much necessarily, but I think that they could live with these numbers.
Yep. Thank you, Dee. I think you're right.
Hey, Chris, it's Steven. Can I
Yes, hi, Steve.
respond to Greg just for 1 second?
Sure.
I mean, I think the local receipts was a hopeful statement. Let me just say that.
Yeah, I wasn't taking that as.
And let me just say, and just to put it in perspective, and you know this, but a lot of movement in local receipts still doesn't equal a small amount of movement in Chapter 70. So
Yeah, I wasn't factoring in the Chapter 70, so
Yeah,
so
the scales
that's where I was. Yeah,
yeah,
Right. And Chapter 70 is up, right? It's coming
Right.
in up, right?
yeah.
So
I was asking the question minus that. Sorry.
But could I make a further point, not to belabor this, but the meals tax does not belong to, it's a general receipt of the town. It does not belong to the town, the town departments versus the school departments. Nor does Chapter 70. I mean, these are all receipts that come in that are available for the town to allocate to different departments. So if local receipts, if meals tax goes up another $100,000, that doesn't automatically mean that the town's budget, and by town, I mean the town department's budget goes up.
Thank you.
Right. Again, I can't see you all because I'm sharing my screen. So if anybody else has a question, just shoot it
Chris,
out.
this is Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Flexibility, is the shift due to the enrollment change at the high school? Does it make sense to set that aside out of the difference and then divide the remainder three ways? Because that's less discretion, it's more like a fixed cost, it seems.
I think they're pretty well covered with this, right? So it worked out.
Okay.
You get to the same place. I hear you, because that's what we were thinking at the beginning. But you can see they get their number.
Sure. Okay.
Chris, I'm going to make a motion that we raise the guidelines by the 2.7 million, Carrie?
It's 2793693.
There you go. And make that the new guideline for fiscal year 2022, and further that we divide it by the sums that we see on the screen here. And if
Divided evenly, so allocated evenly.
there you go, allocated evenly. How's that? Carrie, does that work for you formula wise?
Yep.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Would we be able to see the exact numbers as we're voting?
Yes.
Is that what Carrie is working on now?
I have it.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead, Carrie, if you have it. I have it too, but for some reason, I can't change my page. I may have to come out of this and then bring it up again. But if you have it, that's okay with me. I've done it. I can read it to you, but I'd rather have you see it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Does anyone know why I can't change the page in this? Let me see if I come out. Let me stop sharing for 1 second. Let me try and bring it up again on the other page. Okay, hold on.
You can also stop scaring.
I don't know how to do that. Let's see here. Let me see here if I can bring it up and change the slide. Oh,
I mean, those numbers are pretty scary, so taking them down helps.
that's right. Okay. All right. Now I've got it on the right page. So now I'm going to go back to Zoom and we're going to share screen. Okay. Let's see if that comes up. There we go. So there's your, make it big for you. There you go. So there's the on the middle column there, or the second increment, there's the 2793693. There's your final guideline, if you will, which is the total spend of 92. Then the next column shows you what they asked for, and it shows you the final guideline and the difference by unit.
20.
Good.
Carrie, we were only different from you because of the CCO, was I think of the high school. The high school number was slightly different than your chart when they actually presented on Tuesday.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It
that's
was
the only
less.
difference. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
slightly less, like 60,000,
Right.
small number, but I
Good.
have these are the exact numbers.
It was 21-2 something.
Yeah. So, okay. So everybody.
So what column are we looking at now?
What do you want to know, Dee? So what
I
if you
want to know which one we're voting on.
You're voting on the 2,793,693. That's the vote. The second column, increment dollars on even allocation.
Okay.
Okay. You ready to vote?
We're actually sort of voting on the third column. We're actually voting on, because you're adding the,
Right.
to get, you're
Well,
really voting on that. This is the guideline, 28,962 for the town, 41 blah, blah, 21,367 for CCR. That's what we're really voting. These are your guideline numbers. Right? Third column.
Okay.
It's the total, the amount of
So we're voting
guideline
the
that we
totals.
appropriate is 2.8 million, which brings the spend that we would agree to 92,038,872.
Yeah. And that equates to what percent for the taxpayers?
2.5.
That is the 2.5?
That's the 2.5. Yep.
Yep.
Huh.
Very good.
Okay.
Do we have a motion that we're trying to,
We do.
wordsmith here, or
We have a motion and a
We have a
second.
motion.
And a second.
We do.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the guideline of,
Wait, we have a motion.
We have a motion.
Kathy, we don't need one. We don't need one.
We had a question and now we're discussing and
Yeah, we don't need, we have a motion. So the motion is to add, for the guideline, Mayor, you tell me, I'm thinking it's the 2,793. If the vote is the 92 million, we can make it that way.
we
Tell me
can
what-
embed them both. I mean, we can say the increment is 2,793,693 and a total spend number would be 92 million. We can just,
Yeah. Okay.
They're the same. If you agree with the first column,
You agree with the second?
then you agree with the next.
Right.
The thing
But this-
we're trying to bundle in this motion, I believe, is the actual distribution of the bottom line numbers.
I think
Correct.
we did
And
that
so to
before.
do that, I think
I think I did that when I made the
You
motion.
did.
I said to divide it evenly and add it. And so
Right.
we've arrived at the same conclusion. We can
Right.
redo the motion, but
it's fine.
Right. And the minutes will have the, we'll have a chart, right, that
Yep.
shows in the minutes, this is what we voted. So it'll be
Fair enough.
clear. Okay?
I'm good.
I think we're
All
ready
right.
to vote.
I think we are. So I'm gonna take this down so I can see you. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna just go around my screen. Ray Andrews,
Yes.
Christine Reynolds, yes. Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Dick Jameson,
Yes.
John Hickling,
Yes.
Kathy Kukalo,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Mary Hartman,
Yes.
Wade Rubenstein,
Yes.
Bill Swain,
Yes.
Parashar Patel,
yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Greg Gorello,
Yes.
Andrea Zoll.
Yes.
I think that's everybody, and therefore it's unanimous. And we have a final guideline. Congratulations, group.
Well done. Thank you, Christine.
Well done.
Congratulations,
comment?
Christine.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Christine.
Thank you.
Well done.
Well done, Christine.
Christine, this is Dee. Congratulations to you and also to Carrie for being so creative for for getting us to where we needed to be.
Very much so. Yep, agree with that. And for all the budget units, doing all this work and they keep working. So
Yep.
it's a big team effort. So, but I think we came up with a reasonable guideline. So I'm pleased with it. Okay.
The wisdom
All
of
right.
Solomon. Yeah.
Okay.
We have to
So I
move
think
to
we're all
adjourn. I
set.
think
We have to move to
adjourn.
adjourn and then we'll go to the regular.
I know, it's silly.
I know it is.
do it.
All right. So I
Motion
have a
adjourned.
move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second?
All right. So we'll do roll call vote. John Hickling,
Yes.
Christine Reynolds, yes. Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Dick Jameson,
Yes.
Kathy Kukalo,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Mary Hartman,
Yes.
Parashar Patel,
Yes.
Wade Rubenstein,
Yes.
Bill Swain,
Yes.
Ray Andrews,
Yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Greg Gorello, Andrea Zoll.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned and now we will go to the next one.
Great, thank you. Okay, it is 7:40 and I'm going to call the Finance Committee regular meeting to order. I'm going to go around for roll call. Actually, I need to announce that it is being recorded and I'm going to go around to, again, call the roll. John Hickling,
Yes. Here.
Parashar Patel.
Sorry,
Yes.
here is what you wanted to hear from me. Is
Here's
that
what I
correct?
wanted to hear. Yes,
Okay.
Parashar,
Here.
Christine,
Here,
Dee,
Here.
Dick Jameson,
Here.
Wade Rubenstein,
Here.
Phil Swain,
Here.
Ray Andrews,
Here.
Dean Banfield,
Here.
Lois Wassoff,
Here.
Greg,
Here.
Ariella, Andrea Zoll,
Here.
Kathy.
Here.
Great. Okay, that's it. Good. Thank you. Okay, let's have a regular Finance Committee meeting. We're having so much fun. Let's just keep going.
Let's have one that's just as efficient as that last one.
Really? That was great. Okay. It's up to us. Let's do it. First thing on the agenda is minutes. Did people have a chance to read the minutes that Anita sent out?
Yes.
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Corrections?
Okay, okay, go ahead.
On page 2, the second paragraph, line 6. It says wants for under $100 million, period. Mr. Gorello, and I think it should be Ms., because Greg had recused himself from the discussion.
That's right.
And then on page 4, under where it says citizen comments, none, then it says on a motion made by Ortner, I would like to have inserted there Ms. Ortner to be consistent with every other time that we talk about an individual, not roll call or vote call.
So noted. Anybody else have any changes they'd like to see made on the minutes? Can I have a motion to approve with those changes?
So moved.
Second? Great. I'm going to go around again. John Hickling,
Yes.
myself, Mary Hartman, yes. Parashar Patel,
Yes.
Christine Reynolds,
Yes.
Dee Ortner, Dee,
Yes.
Dick Jameson,
Yeah.
Yes.
Wade Rubenstein,
Yes.
Phil Swain,
Yes.
Ray Andrews,
Yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Greg Gariello,
Yes.
Andrea Zoll,
Yes.
Kathy Kokolo.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next thing on the agenda, we need to vote on the guideline. So Chris, would you like to propose to the larger group, which happens to be the same group, but would you like to propose to the larger group the guideline?
Yes, so I propose that we accept the guideline recommendation from the Finance Committee Subcommittee on the final guideline for FY22.
Second.
Second, do I hear a second? John, good, okay. I'll go around for a vote. John Hickling,
Yes.
myself, Mary Hartman, yes. Parashar Patel,
Yes.
Christine Reynolds,
Yes.
Dee Ortner, Dee,
Yes.
Dick Jameson,
Yes.
Yes.
Wade,
Yes.
Wade,
Yes.
Phil Swain,
Yes.
Ray Andrews,
Yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Greg Gariello,
Yes.
Andrea Zoll,
Yes.
Kathy Kuakalo.
Yes.
Great. You know, we might want to think next year about making the guideline a true subcommittee, which is a subset of the larger committee. I'm just putting that out there. We could talk about it next year, but we did talk about it last year. I don't know why we didn't do it, but it's something to think about. Okay, the next item is,
Who would get to miss out on the fun?
now we're going to have fun other ways. Okay, the next thing that we need to talk about is this Saturday is a town meeting preview, which the moderator puts together with the chair of the select board to look at known warrant articles that are coming up so that we can have a preview of what to expect. So it's this Saturday. I'm going to present two things. One is an article that I would like to move on behalf of the Finance Committee. So tonight, what I'm going to present to you is that article so that we can discuss it and see if, in fact, that is something that you support. This is about changing the date of the guideline. So let me bring up see if I can share the screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep. Great. Okay, so what I'd like to do, this is a very brief slide a presentation that I'm going to put together, going to review with you tonight. And if you agree with it, I will again present it this Saturday morning. I'm going to back up I need to slideshow. Wait, let me get over here, go back to the beginning. Okay. The article is to determine whether the town will vote to replace the policy established in Article 4 of 1976 annual town meeting relative to establishing and publishing the guideline. Here is a look at what we voted for in 1976. Specifically, the Finance Committee shall annually establish a guideline for budget increases to be considered in fiscal year planning by the Board of Selectmen, that's for the town budget, the Concord Public Schools, and the Concord Carlisle Regional. And said guideline will be published in the local press prior to November 30th of the previous fiscal year. So this is the article that I'm hoping to replace with this. The Finance Committee shall annually establish guidelines for the budget increases to be considered in fiscal year planning by the Select Board, the Concord Public School Committee, and the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee, and will publish said guidelines on the town website no later than 5 weeks before the scheduled close of the warrant. And here are the substantive changes that I'm making. The first change would be the date for publishing the guideline will now be relative to the scheduled close of the warrant instead of the fixed date, which was it was November 30th, the original article. Guidelines is now plural since in practice, separate guidelines are given to each entity based on their budget drivers. I realize that is not what we did tonight, but I believe this will give us the flexibility to do that if we want. The guidelines will be posted on the town website instead of in the local paper because actually the recent survey by the town showed that most people do get their information from the website and not from the Concord Journal. And then finally, selectmen is replaced by select board. Any questions?
So I have a question, Mary. Could you just go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
And I don't mean to harp on semantics here, but
Go ahead.
but it does say annually establish guidelines for budget increases. Budgets, for the most part, increase, but they don't always increase, I'm told. I'm just wondering if the phraseology might be adjusted there in some acceptable fashion.
Yeah, I second that. I had the same concern, exactly the same concern.
Okay, how about changes?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
Changes.
Adjustments.
Perfect.
Adjustments sounds well.
Adjustments.
Well, what do people think? Changes or adjustments?
How about
Adjustments.
I like the idea that there should be some indication that we're not changing the budget during the year. We're changing it in relation to the budget that was approved for the prior year. So maybe it should be budget for budget adjustments to the prior year's budget to be considered. I mean, something that grounds it as opposed to implying that we can change it anytime other than the established.
Well, you have the word annually in there.
Are we changing it? We're only doing it as part of the town's budget process, not within a
That's
year,
the point.
right?
That's right.
That's the point.
So is it actually shall annually establish guidelines for the next fiscal year? So
for the budget for the next fiscal year.
Yeah, for the budget for the next fiscal year, without getting into adjustments and changes or relative to anything else.
Perfect.
That's really what we're doing.
Mary?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see. Is that
No,
you?
Mary, it's Stephen. Can I offer a suggestion?
Sure.
Because I think it would be clear to say, may establish guidelines for the town manager's budget for the coming fiscal year.
Well, we
like
also have guidelines for the schools, so that.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, and also it's really, these guidelines are supposed to be given to the select board, the school and the school committee, not.
But the town manager writes the budget. Under the charter, the town manager prepares the budget. That's listen. Sorry, I was trying to be helpful. I will mute myself.
Okay. I think we're still stuck on here. This first sentence, which is okay. John brought up take out the word increases altogether, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but then we're also saying, but should we make it more concrete? I just screwed that up. But
I like what Parashar said.
make it more concrete.
Budgets for the coming fiscal year.
Right. Shall
Guidelines.
annually establish guidelines for the next fiscal year, the budget guidelines for the next fiscal year.
Budget.
Yeah, annually establish budget guidelines for the next fiscal year.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
Annually established budget. I'm writing this down. Budget guidelines for the next
For
fiscal
the
year.
next fiscal year.
Yeah. Hey, Mary,
Yeah.
is the word guidelines itself a financial term? I mean, is it well understood?
Actually, no.
I think it's used in towns, though. We're not the only town that calls it that. So I think it's an accepted phrase in municipal finance.
I agree. And it's in Concord, it's certainly well known. I think most people know what guidelines mean within the town. Some people have called it guardrails, but guidelines is the preferred term.
So can I make a suggestion on the town website?
Yeah.
Given that it took 45 years to change the previous. So maybe something along the lines of, oh, I'm sorry, what did you have there? Town website or other mechanisms for widespread public distribution or something. Who the hell knows what's going to happen 20 years from now? Websites may be dead.
But why don't we leave it at website? It's one word and it gets the job done for the next 15 at least.
I would suggest that not everybody reads the website. I mean, not everybody in the senior category has a computer or access to it or knows how to use it. So why not include the Concord Journal as well?
Well, why not take them both out and we'll publish?
Yeah, we'll
said
publish.
guideline. That's all.
Yeah, we'll publish it.
I think what you're trying.
Yeah.
Sorry, hey Mary, I'm sorry because there are some rules associated with this. What you're really trying to say is the official place of publication,
right?
Or town notices. It used to be a bulletin board. It's no longer that, and I don't know how we currently word that, but I think we could probably figure that out, and maybe. I don't know, maybe for Saturday, but I think what you're really trying to say is, advertise it in the official, in the official posting place, including website or whatever. You're right. 10 years from now, who the heck knows? But I would just kind of maybe put a asterisk or something next to website as a cue for us to look up what that language should specifically be. But in most things, the website is the official posting location.
I will say, you're right. We had to address this somehow as far as how we're going to advertise this information. And I did pass this by Carmen, who basically agreed that, yes, the town website is probably the best way to go. But we could look at this again if we want to. I mean, this is really just a draft for the preview meeting.
Mary, can I make also a suggestion here, even to Stephen there, is can the town actually say what their official is, and then we just point to a generic what the town's official publication is? That way we don't have to worry about 20 years down the line. The town has one place where they need to update it, and all of the rules will then follow what the town suggests is the public place to do it.
Yeah, what is the town's public place?
It's right now. It's the website, and it should be a big T town there.
Is that described anywhere? How do the residents know that the website is the official place?
I think some of that is. I used to know this.
Yeah.
For other reasons.
What document can Mary, or what writing can Mary put in here to reference where the town says its established place is the website?
Well, I wouldn't do that necessarily. I would just by reference, I think is what you want to do. And so down.
Hey Stephen, I think Anita's got her hand up, but I think it's the charter, the bylaws.
We have a town posting bylaw that you probably don't want to go there because it requires posting one place in each precinct. Is our official place. I don't believe we have, the town website is the official place that we've got on register with the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office for posting of public meetings. But the official posting locations is not that.
Yeah, Anita, I thought the recent changes to the open record law kind of said websites are the official place now.
Not statewide, Stephen. I don't believe, but we are on record, which each town has to say where is your official posting place. Some towns have bulletin boards outside their front building. That's how they do it. So each town has some leeway there. And ours is the website. But I think if you say on the town's official posting, it's just going to open up a can of worms because we have a posting bylaw, which is not the website.
When the media changes, this article can change again.
Well, for what's that's worth,
Right.
Anita, what do you
website's okay.
I think town website's fine.
The big T.
Agree with the big T. And you took out that planning, those planning lines. Okay. I
Okay,
was
the
just
Finance
trying
Committee
to.
shall annually establish budget guidelines for the next fiscal year for the Select Board, the Concord Public School Committee, and the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee, and will publish said guidelines on the town website no later than 5 weeks before the scheduled close of the warrant.
I have a question.
Yeah, Andrea.
To Ray's point, and as the observer to the Council on Aging, I've become very aware during this whole COVID and looking for vaccines and care and everything, very aware of the difficulty of a lot of seniors, including myself, negotiating websites or having computers. Does this exclude publishing in the paper or,
No.
someplace that would be available? Like 5 years down the road, everybody may have a computer and be able to use it. But does this exclude?
No, this doesn't preclude that from happening. It doesn't. This is simply prescribing that it must happen on the town website. And I will also say that a lot of things that are published in the paper now come straight off of the town's website.
And we do, so Andrea, sorry, Mary,
Go
because
ahead.
this is a critical point of information, whether it's this and the point about, bringing up somewhat of an overdue issue, I think highlights, it's not just this one, it's not just the guidelines.
Right. Yeah,
This is a discussion about tons of stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we just did our citizen satisfaction survey, and I think it's posted now.
Where is it posted?
I think it's posted. I see what you did there. Very good. But I think interestingly, the respondent age, it's the general. I think we had 1,500 responses. Most of them are, I think, over 65. And when you look at the trends of where people get information, especially senior citizens, it is a remarkable growth in how people are accessing, senior citizens are accessing information online, to the point where I was surprised by the percentages. And so I guess what I would say is we don't have to fix it for now because this is just a slide preview. But as you think about public information, how it's communicated, I would refer you back to that, because that communication section was really, for me, illustrative in reading this year's report. When you go through and look at most of the categories, the ratios don't change a lot. Communications really has moved a lot in the last few years. And I would just, like I said, I think that can inform the committee's thinking on this approach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mary, I have one question. So
yeah,
the 5 weeks. So how did I think that's in sync with what we just did. Is that how we came to the 5 weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
It is how we came to the 5 weeks. And you're bringing up a really good point. And one of the things that I know Carmen is going to be talking to the select board about in early March, which is looking at the entire calendar that leading up to town meeting. So we could be condensing some of these dates, and there could be some changes in the works. But for now, we're just sticking with the same 5 weeks that we've always had. Okay, because we're opening up a lot of other questions, as you can tell from this conversation. So this 5 week thing might be condensed, as well as other dates that line up to the town meeting.
So we might have to change it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We might
Okay.
have to change it again.
Is there anything that we could do in here that would make it more flexible so that we wouldn't have to come back and change it? I don't have any ideas, but that's too bad if we have to keep going back to town meeting for this item. But
Well, let me, if we go back to what we'll call the traditional schedule, this would kind of still map us back pretty much to November 30th or somewhere very close to November 30th.
Exactly.
Right.
That has been on my watch on the finance committee, that has been a tension point for the schools. They have a lot of trouble when you're trying to get kids into the buildings, and it's September, October, and yet you're trying to assemble a calendar, a budget for the coming year, and you barely even operated the budget yet for the current year. So this, it has been a challenge, and this is just basically saying we're going to stick to it. You know, I don't know how to adjust for the schools.
Okay, I think we're asking this article to do more than we can do with one article. The Finance Committee can't change the entire budget or the entire calendar going up to town meeting. Right. All we're trying to do here is change one little thing about it, which is the guideline that we ran into a problem last year and we ran into a problem this year. So we're trying to preclude that from happening. But you're bringing up a great point, both Chris and Dean. Yes. The calendar right now doesn't work well for the schools. I don't think it works well for the town as far as making, just from a financial point of view, realistic budgets. So let's work on that. And again, I know Carmen's going to be talking to the select board in early March and hopefully putting together a working group to do just that.
And if I can just, Christine, I think that the language Mary has drafted already to some degree addresses your point.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mary, if you bring the language up again, it says no later than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does provide, it says it's got to be at least that, but the town can move that date. We can be instructed to do it a couple weeks earlier. We can't be instructed to do it closer in time. So there is some flexibility already built into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Mary, does this wording meet your requirements?
I think so. Yes.
Can I move that we vote?
Please.
Second.
Okay.
Sorry, I should really move that we approve Mary's proposed warrant article as amended.
Second.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can see you all. Okay, I'm going to go around and take a vote. Ray Andrews?
Yes.
Myself, Mary Hartman, yes. Christine Reynolds?
Yes.
Dee Ortner?
Yes.
Dick Jamieson?
Yes.
John Hickling?
Yes.
Wade Rubenstein?
Yes.
Phil Swain?
Yes.
Karatar Patel?
Yes.
Dean Banfield?
Yes.
Lois Wassoff?
Yes.
Ray Gariello?
Yes.
Andrea Zoll?
Yes.
Kathy Kwokolo?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. The next thing I have on the agenda here is Chair's Report. I just have a few things to say. I want to give us a brief overview of what's going to happen over the next few months now that we've done the work around the guideline, what's ahead of us as far as discharging our duties here as the Finance Committee going towards town meeting. We're not going to have a meeting on March 18th. Okay, so we don't need a meeting on March 18th. We've got a good guideline. Our next meeting is March 25th. I'm expecting that to be a pretty typical meeting. And then in April, at the end of April, we start up with the hearings that we're going to host. So we're going to host hearings on any warrant articles that have to do with spending money. And those will happen in 3 weeks at the end of April and at the beginning of May. And then in May, we'll have to come together and vote our recommendations on these articles. And then town meeting is in June. So the big thing we've got coming up now is the hearings and getting together a discussion and recommendations on warrant articles. So for all the committees that you are observers to, if they've got any articles that they're going to move at town meeting that have financial implications, I guess it's time to like listen up so that you can come in and guide us through our discussion of those warrant articles. The other thing we have coming up is the FinCom report, which Carrie, Carrie, are you still with us?
I am.
When does the FinCom report have to go to the printer?
You know what? I'll have to pull up that schedule. I don't have it in front of me.
That's okay.
It's about typically, about 5 weeks before town meeting is when we typically would be sending it, because it needs to, when you would need to finish, because it needs 1 to 2 weeks with the printer, and it has to be in the mail 2 weeks before town meeting.
Okay, so we're talking early May.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so again, Perry and Lois and I are working together to hopefully simplify the report, but each one of you will be asked to write something about the groups that you're observing, especially if they've got articles that they're moving at town meeting that have financial implications. So keep that in mind, because we're going to be coming to you and asking for your write-up. The only other thing that I would like to share with you tonight is something when the Board of Assessors came to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, I guess I should have said that, came to the Select Board to talk about the residential tax exemption. And they recommended that the town not adopt a residential tax exemption. And I think, Kathy, you alerted us to that. And sure enough, the Select Board did not. But when Lane Partridge was presenting their analysis of the residential tax exemption, he brought up some interesting statistics that I'd like to, or interesting comps that I'd like to share with you. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what he did is he looked at what are real estate taxes on a 2,500 square foot home across 3 different towns. So we're simply looking at the size of the home and not its market value. So we're looking at Concord, Acton, Lexington, and Maynard. The comps that he had were square foot homes that were, as you can see, they're close to 2,500 square feet for a home. I put the tax rate in here just for information. And here we look at the tax bill. So we're taking out the market value as it relates to how much does a person who lives in a 2,500 square foot home pay for property tax. And you can see that Concord is in fact the highest. The next is Acton, which I found surprising, actually. The next is Lexington, which I didn't find surprising. And then we have Maynard. And then over here, I have whether there's a uniform tax rate or not. Concord has a uniform tax rate, which means that commercial and residential pay the same rate. Acton has a uniform rate. Lexington splits between residential and commercial, and they have a very large commercial tax base, and Maynard as well. So I found this interesting because, and I'm going to editorialize a little bit here, but I found this interesting because I'm struggling with how do we control spending so that we keep property tax rates sustainable? And when I look at what we have for contractual obligations and I look at the sustainable growth rate, I say, I don't see how we're going to save ourselves to an affordable tax rate going forward. And if I look at this, I say to myself, perhaps we need either a non-uniform tax rate, which I know the commercial people will oppose, or maybe we need more commercial development. I'm just throwing that out there.
So Mary?
Yeah.
This is Rasha. I think, so a couple of questions, or I guess there's some implicit assumptions, I think, in the way you stated it. And I would come back and ask a couple questions.
Go ahead.
One is, when we say affordable or sustainable and sustainable for whom? The commercial sector or residents? And then even further, lower income residents, those on fixed income. And I guess that's my basic question, right? Because it's a little bit challenging to take the home value. I'm frankly not surprised by what I see here, because Acton has a pretty high rate.
Yes.
But their values are lower. And so I'm not right. And so, and I guess, I struggle on this myself. I don't have an answer in terms of, if I pose those questions, I would assume that we mean affordable and sustainable for lower income homeowners, residents, and those that maybe on fixed, again, lower income, fixed income, right? yeah, I'm sure there are wealthy Concordians that are on fixed income because of their investments, but yet are considered high income and could probably afford these rates. So I guess I struggle with who are we trying to make it affordable for and sustainable for?
Yeah, we could talk about this a lot. I think one of the things that the Finance Committee has been committed to is to make sure that we have a diverse population within town. So you could argue that in Concord, you pay more, but you get more. And I agree with that. But what this does mean is that, and again, I'm editorializing here, but you've got wealthy people in Concord that can afford these taxes, and that's fine. You've got very low income people who are helping with our investment in affordable housing. And I guess it's the middle that we're losing diversity in the middle. That's my editorial comment. And this is the 13,000 without, you add the middle school to that, and it just went up to 14,000, close to,
And when you say middle, you're talking middle income folks or middle housing value, right?
Middle income.
And I guess, and I don't know the answer to this.
Yep.
Concord's big enough to do this, but to see whether the distribution of household incomes, how that's changed over time. I don't know the answer. That might help.
Can I offer a few comments on that? I've looked at the HUD website a fair number of times over time, and this does lead us to some kind of troubling statistics. The area median income that's calculated by HUD for this area is quite a broad swath of Massachusetts. It goes as far north as Gloucester, it goes as far south as Duxbury, and it goes almost out to 495, not including Worcester. So it's a big area when they say, what's the area median income? For a family of four, it's $98,000. And for Concord, only 28% of households are at or below the median area income. So we're a relatively wealthy community, and so it stands to reason that we would only have less than a third of our population at or below this very broad area median income. However, that group is very challenged in terms of their housing costs. There are 1,885 households with that income profile at 100% of the median, area median or below. So it's about 28% of the households in the town, of which 1,400 of those households are spending 30% or more on housing costs. So that's a big challenge. That's 75% of those households are spending, 30% or more of their household income on their housing. So we want to take a look. It is a challenge. And there's a healthy percentage of them who are paying 50% or more of their household income on housing. So that is those are the numbers, and it is to push that group through rising taxes. It's the only lever that we have. We do have the senior means tested exclusion, which is very helpful because maybe some of that group, and we could have to parse that a little more closely by age bracket. Maybe a lot of that group is in a senior capacity that would qualify for some of the senior means tested stuff. But otherwise, the only other lever we really have is kind of reining in taxes. So that's my 2 cents there. It is a problem.
Lois, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I think there are influences on this that are really way outside of our remit. But one that occurs to me because of where I live in the Southfield Circle area. Mm-hmm. And I've lived here since 1992 in the same house. And I have seen the neighborhood behind me change. And every time one of those small capes turns over, it's replaced by a huge house. That is a permanent change in the availability of housing for middle-income people. It's not just that, there's a bigger house, it sells for a lot of money, produces a lot of tax revenue. It's bought by people who can presumably afford to pay the higher taxes. It means that in addition to the people that Dean's talking about who live here already and who are struggling, who are more middle income, we're not providing a window for other people to come in to buy into Concord, because we are, because over time that housing stock has been slowly eroded. So, I mean, that's something that we as citizens can be concerned about, and we can encourage the select board to think about. I don't know that that's something that we as a finance committee can do much about. But I just think there are a lot of forces at work here, and thinking about managing tax rates it's kind of a blunt instrument to get at the larger issues of making Concord a place that's hospitable for a very broad income range of citizens.
Thank you.
I completely agree with Lois. It is a blunt instrument. No disagreement there.
It is. Dee?
Mary, I just want to go back to something that you said early on in your discussion of this, which is, do we look for other ways, such as you had commented about commercial?
Yep.
Right now, 91% of our taxes come from residential, the residences in our town. And I think we should be looking at, can we encourage more commercial industrial activity in the town so that we're not always raising the taxes on our homeowners? It would be, it's a long-term strategy, but I think it's one that we do have properties that come up, and they could be zoned for commercial or industrial activity, and just to see how we could move forward in that way and have maybe just a better balance in where our tax dollars are coming from.
Right. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was maybe my hidden agenda.
Mm-hmm. It's not so hidden, Mary.
Well, we've got this 229.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. 2229 Main Street.
229, right. 2229 Main Street coming up. And I know that the commitment right now is to keep it neutral, cost neutral, but I would say it's an opportunity there to maybe make it a revenue generating. Just throwing that out.
The possibility.
And you're right.
Can I
don't
comment
know.
on that? I completely agree with Mary and Dee on the fact that we have a limited stock of commercial and the kinds of demands that commercial properties make on the community are very different than those that are made by people living in homes. One of the things that was, I was very disappointed that it happened, but it happened, was that we converted commercial light industrial zones properties on Forest Ridge Road when the argument was made at town meeting that the highest purpose for these, or the highest revenue opportunity for these, was to put housing on them, but for people who would be more advanced in age and not to make demands on the school system, which is the biggest draw. We have also, since that vote was taken, added 4 firefighters over at the West Concord Fire Station to support an ambulance service, because there are more and more ambulance calls going out of West Concord because we have more elderly people. So I'm not blaming elderly people. I'm just saying the town is making decisions that are, changing the nature of our capacity to have commercial industrial uses by literally taking them off the block and converting them to residential. So it's,
I'll go back to something that Lois said, that she's not sure that this is in the remit of the Finance Committee. And yet, the Finance Committee is by law recommends anything where we spend money or we acquire or dispose of property. So the StarMet land the decisions is soon going to be, should the town take acquisition of that? And the Finance Committee, I'm hopeful, has a voice in that conversation, and under what conditions would they think that this would be a good idea for the town to do so. So that's why I'm bringing this up now. but we don't have to do this tonight. We don't have to, there's no decision in front of us. I just wanted to start people thinking.
Well, so Mary, I agree with what Lois said earlier also. I mean, this is multi-dimensional, right? I don't know. And frankly, even lowering the tax burden may not really address the other issues about diversity and bringing in more middle income folks, because it has to do with where the jobs are and a whole host of other things. So I think my opinion is certainly we should talk about it and generate some ideas. But at the end of the day, if it would require, I think, concerted effort on the part of the select board,
Yes.
other committees, et cetera, to get together and kind of figure out, if we're going to make a meaningful impact, what we ought to be doing over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years.
I agree. And I think everyone in the town agrees with that. And I think these conversations are ongoing and we've tried many ways to solve this. So is there anybody have anything else to say?
I just had one comment. So, I mean, I also assume that, well, obviously zoning comes into it, as Dean mentioned, if the town wants to have zoning for this. When we look at the citizen survey, town character comes up pretty high on the list. And so part of that is people's feeling about how they like Concord to look and to feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that enters into it. That doesn't mean they'd be against commercial either, but that's kind of the sense that you get. And I know that the town manager and the select board have even just talked about trying to build up local business, and a lot of that would be tourist related. And there's some interesting discussion about, can we have the buses in town? So I think it's a pretty complex issue, and I do think that Stephen's office as well would have, a big, some input, some important input on, what's the feasibility of us trying to seek more commercial uses in the town to change the taxes. So I think it's a great question, but it is complex.
It's do you want to weigh in at all, Stephen, or am I putting you on the spot?
No, I actually, to be honest with you, I've spent, as we've mentioned in this space a number of times, my former gig, the town had the highest tax rate in the Commonwealth. So I have spent a significant amount of time evaluating tax rates, land use, evaluating split tax rates, all of these issues you're talking about, I've spent a lot of time on. In each community is somewhat different, but the pressure points and variables and the one that we haven't mentioned, market forces, mm-hmm. are pretty consistent across a lot of communities in Massachusetts, especially in this region, much more so than Western Mass. But I will say we're in a chair's report, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's stop.
Yeah. But I do think one thing this is the one thing I agree with you on, Mary, but I think I do wholeheartedly agree that these are important conversations. I mean, the split tax rate always looks like such an attractive option, but when you really get into the details of our percentage and what it does to a commercial property versus the average residential property taxpayer, it is so asymmetrical that it really isn't fair to the commercial base, which is an important part of I've heard throughout the pandemic how much people cherish our commercial centers, especially our retail. Well, if you have a commercial rate, the rents, the triple net leases on all those spaces go up. And so imagine the impact on the pandemic if there was a split rate on our retail establishments for a very small savings for the average homeowner. And I think, like I said, I think the biggest thing is real estate market forces. Lois, you talked about the teardowns, and Concord's not unique in that regard for sure. But if someone's going to pay a premium for a cape and then pay another premium to build a much larger house, that really says something about what the value of living in Concord is. Yeah. And the problem is, there's obviously no easy answers, but I do think one of the things that this finance committee especially, does a very good job of is making sure that with the guidelines, we're paying attention to year over year growth. And I think right now, if You kind of asked me for my opinion, Mary, so I'm going to give it to you. The best tool you have, this finance committee has, to combat the growth in taxation is the guideline, and you do a very good job of using it for that purpose. And so there's not a lot of other tools in the toolbox to move the needle on these other things. And so I think the guideline issue is really where the focus is, and should be, because that's really, like I said, the year over year. The other things are, they have as much to do with MCAS scores and proximity to jobs, as Parashar mentioned, as they do, any other factor. And that's the tough part. It's, the cold truth, if you will, is there are people for whom maintaining their home in Concord with the taxes is a struggle. But by the same token, someone is going to give them a bucket of money for that same home. And this is where the diversity, the diversity of housing stock and the housing opportunities for people to be able to downsize at a reasonable rate. These are the areas that I think we should be focused on. I know the 1440 Main Street thing was a big controversial issue. And I felt like if they had built Concord Green, 2.0, people would have really embraced that, because it would have met a housing need that is in high demand but low supply. So I'm now editorializing too, and
You are. Okay. Okay. I'm going to call the chair's report to a close by just saying that I agree with you that I think that the guideline process is a very powerful tool, and we use it beautifully, especially tonight. But I think that the Finance Committee also has a voice. We are, by charter, weighing in on disposition of property. So I think we can have a voice to influence things beyond just operating budgets. That's all I want to say. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to correspondences. We have had several letters from people about Estabrook, the Estabrook litigation. Specifically, they're talking about spending. And for the record, I just need to say that the Finance Committee last year was asked for the third year in a row to approve a reserve fund transfer that we didn't approve. But that is really the only time that the Finance Committee weighs in on spending for Estabrook Woods. We do not manage the town manager's budget. We don't manage it by line item. We can't go in and say what they should or shouldn't spend their money on. That is decided by the townspeople at town meeting. So if people, I appreciate the letters. I don't anticipate a reserve fund transfer request this year. And if people have an opinion, and people do have strong feelings about that, the best place to air those would be either at the Finance Committee hearings, which happen on April 29th, or at town meeting itself. We also had...
Can I just, one other, the select board are the folks that manage the town. And so, in my opinion, that's where the appropriate forum is.
Yes.
The select board and the select board meetings, in addition to the places you talked about.
Exactly. And all these letters were sent to the select board as well. I need to make clear for the record what our responsibility is, and ours is limited to the reserve fund transfer, and that is not in front of us.
Yeah, I totally support what you're saying. We have a particular remit. We're not the town's auditors. We do not manage the town's functions. We're not elected. We're appointed. The people who set the policy in town are the selectmen, select board members who answer to the people and who run for election. So they're making the policies. We have a particular important role, but it doesn't include the kind of issues that are being raised by this correspondence. So we're just not the right forum to consider this.
But if the people are writing us letters because of the spending, I think that's why they think that.
But they're not writing us letters because of the spending in the larger sense, Mary. These letters are focused on really line items and management at a very granular level, which is really not within our responsibility. Yes, when you're talking about policy issues or about issues involving larger macro issues involving spending, yeah. But line item stuff like this, the select board, town manager, performing their job functions. That's the right place for this to be. It doesn't belong with us.
Thank you. Greg, do you want to say something?
Yeah, can you, while we are on this topic, my sense that people are writing to the select or to the finance committee is to kind of to block the spend of it. Can you comment right now, or Carrie comment as well, is the money has been spent. We don't have that capability to block it. I don't think a lot of the discussion that we had multiple times of what happens if we vote not to do the transfer, it goes to town meeting, but it still comes out of the budget. I don't think a lot of town residents understand that us saying, no, don't take it out of reserve funds means that we don't pay it.
It still goes away. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Remember that conversation? We must have had it like 4 or 5 times ourselves.
Well, there are two things. One is, do we want to use reserve funds to pay, to transfer money if the legal expense line is overspent? That's one conversation, and that would require a request, a formal request that I don't anticipate getting. The other problem will be if the town overspends that line item. This is not happening now, so I don't want to bring it up tonight, but eventually we might have to decide how we want to handle that. And Carrie will come and Stephen will come to us with a proposal. So we can talk about that then. Okay. But
if it ever happens.
I just think the residents are getting the sense if we say no, do not allow that funds transfer, that it kind of like stops the money from going anywhere, and it doesn't.
It doesn't. You're right.
I know it doesn't. I have a sense from those letters that they're asking us to block it, because it won't get spent.
Yeah. I think one issue, there are probably others, but one issue is that there is some confusion about the finance committee role outside of town government. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, because Mary and I are talking tomorrow about doing some work on the language of the report. And one of the things that I've been doing is looking back at all of the public documents that define our role and thinking about how we can highlight that a little more in the report, move that up instead of burying it in a notes section at the end, to try and get people to understand what we do and why it's important and what its parameters are. And it doesn't mean that the finance committee gets involved in all of the money the town spends and the way line items are managed. We don't, and we shouldn't. It's not the contribution we're making to the town. Those responsibilities are elsewhere.
And there's a way for people to be heard.
Exactly.
Somewhere else, right?
Yep.
But
exactly.
It's not our role.
Yep.
Okay, good. The other letter we got was from Nancy James about StarMet.
Could I just add one thing? There's one bit of it. This is probably not going to be seen by any of the people for whom this problem exists, but there is a misconception that continues, and it was expressed in one of these letters, that somehow we took money from the library in order, and that it then, therefore, we took it and spent it on legal fees. That was not the case. We didn't do anything of the kind. So
you said that beautifully last year at town meeting. You said it again in an op-ed in the paper. And, how many times can you?
I know, but they apparently
posted on the website, James.
So it's been that letter's been answered.
Okay.
Or,
fine, fair enough. And as I said, the people who need to hear this probably will not, so it's fine, whatever.
I would like to encourage people, though, if they feel strongly about this, to speak up at hearings, at select board meetings, and at town meeting. I don't want. These are citizens. These are taxpayers. They have a right to be heard.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not our job. We can't help them, but they can be heard. There are ways for them to be heard. Okay, moving on to Nancy James' letter about StarMet. Nancy James is a risk analyst, a professional. She's also has a training in science, and I thought her letter was very well written. It's right now we have nothing in front of us. The Finance Committee has nothing in front of us, but I was happy that she alerted us to some of the issues as this project moves forward. And then finally, we got a letter from I think Jeff Parker about White Pond, and Again, I would encourage Mr. Parker to go to the hearing when we talk about the municipal capital plan, which we'll talk about money approved. I don't even know whether we're allocating money to White Pond, but you can go there, and also at town meeting. Those are the places to bring that up. And we heard him, and we ourselves have questions about spending there. So that's all I have to say about that. Okay, I'm going to go right now and do observer reports. Ray, you're in the upper. You want to tell us what's going on with the committees you're observing?
I'm going to plead that I'm a new guy, okay? But I'm probably starting to maybe abuse that privilege. The CHDC certainly met and talked a lot about the StarNet property, and Nancy James came to that committee meeting last time, and that was very helpful and seemed to infuse the committee with the conversation with caution about that as a residential property, or even as a place that is a piece of property the town should consider taking possession of. I guess everybody read her letter anyway, so I mean everybody in this group read her letter, so that was useful. Yeah, I didn't prepare a report for tonight. I think that the CPA is going to recommend 233,000. Is that the right number? I'm sorry. Something over 200,000 requests for housing to go to. Doesn't go to see. I don't know. Yeah, I guess the answer is I'm not prepared to do a report tonight, so maybe I shouldn't be wandering around.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to alert you to, though, you're the observer to the CMLP as well, right, Ray?
Yes, right.
Okay, because they came and presented to the select board recently, so there's some interesting things going on there that you might want to come up to speed on.
Yeah, nothing came up as far as warrant articles at that meeting. Obviously, there's a lot of things about smart meters and that sort of thing that may involve investment, but I didn't hear anything in those meetings, in those last two meetings, about coming to the town for money.
Okay. Well, they're an enterprise fund, and they'll be at the hearing, the last hearing. So,
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Chris, have you been busy lately?
Yes, I have, but yet, so CPC is, I'm the observer for CPC. And I think the last time we talked about it was really the last update. There was supposed to be a meeting, I think it was this week, but I went online and it didn't happen for some reason. But they had already they have already gone through their process to allocate the funds, and they were done. And I can't remember the exact number at this point, but Carrie, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's a little bit over $1 million. And the large components we've talked about before. So there was, as Ray just mentioned, so there was a request for affordable housing. Initially, they had funded that, I think, at around $126,000, but then there was some funds left over after they finished all the other allotments, and that was also given. So I think you're right. It was ended up somewhere around $200,000 for affordable housing coming out of CPC. The Wright Tavern, which was also a very large request, ended up at a lower amount, but it is still a significant request, and that was really appropriated for what I'll call stabilization type projects. Mm-hmm. So things that the committee believed were necessary to prevent the building from being damaged if there was, a terrible storm or something like that. So there were some foundational issues that the CPC allocated money for to Wright Tavern. There was also Warner's Pond dredging, so that was $250,000. That was appropriated, and White Pond. And I'm just looking for what the number was for White Pond. That was also a significant amount, but it was appropriated in full, is my recollection. So there were several large buckets. I don't have the number for White Pond in front of me. When we come to do the warrant I'll have all the details on it. But I think their process was good and thorough, and I observed it, and I'll bring to you what they had. There is the Right Tavern, not too different from what we had last year. Remember, we had 2 items on the CPC list that we talked to town council about.
Yep.
One was the allocation to the rectory for Holy Family, and the other was the bell tower for the Unitary Church. And Right Tavern is owned by the Unitary Church, so that was also discussed, and there also was a discussion with council on that. So I can provide details on that, so can the members from the committee. So
I have one question, if I could.
Yes, Dean.
So on the Right Tavern, are they going forward with these stabilization efforts on the basis of what's called a historic structures report, which is usually done preliminarily to survey the problems, identify where the big ticket items are, and what do you got to do first? Are they working?
Yes, well, it's an interesting question, and I learned a lot as I watched the deliberations of the group. So initially, so the task force that came forward from the church to ask for the money from CPC, they knew they had a deadline in the fall. CPC starts their work, I think. The meetings were in December, I think, and the applications had to be in maybe October, November. So that was shortly after. Dee, you would know. Yeah, so that was shortly after these folks had formed their task force. So there was kind of a race, and I think that the initial application, the things you just mentioned, were not done. But through the back and forth with CPC, the team that they engaged widened. So they hired some more historical architects and historical restoration people, so that I believe that report that you asked for was in fact done. And it was discussed with the historical committee in the town, separate and apart from CPC. So I believe, and there was a lot of discussion on this, Dean, but I'm not an expert on it, that their conclusion was they narrowed it down to those things that they felt were truly fundamental. There's a big debate about the third floor, where the third floor, I think, is the most untouched of the floors in the building, because the building is used as a commercial. There's an architect's firm there. I think there's a real estate firm in the lower first floor. The second floor has had some work done to it too. So the third floor is where the roof is, and some of the foundational issues involve the roof and the structural beams that support it. That was a lot of debate about whether a historical preservationist would make a different change, if you would, than someone who was trying to renovate the building. So there was a lot of discussion about what the appropriate changes would be there. I think they came away with doing more work in the basement and a few other things. So I'm sure they can come and explain it better than I have.
You answered the question like
they did ask all those. They asked all those questions, and they were satisfied.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, that's it for me.
Thanks, Chris. Dee, do you have any more to say about the schools?
Yeah, I wanted to, they talked about their budgets on Tuesday night. And if anybody is interested in looking at the budget information, the detailed budget information, it's available on the school committee website. Just click on finance and it'll be down there, the FY22 budgets. So I'm not going to talk about numbers per se. What I wanted to talk about was some of the other pieces of information that came up at that time at the meeting. One of them is that the assumptions, the timeline and the assumptions that were discussed. And I think everybody is probably aware that there is scheduled on March 9th, they have a placeholder for the CPS public hearing. On the 19th of March, the warrant articles are due to Concord. April 30th is the time that the budget books will be available. And May 6th is the Concord Finance Committee public hearing. And then, so that's the timeline that they're working at. And then from a budget, for the assumptions in creating the budget, I just wanted to go and highlight a couple of them. both at the pre-K through 5th grade students, they will be back in school full time. And at the high school, they'll be back at school full time.
In September. Yep.
In September. Yeah,
Right.
this is for next year's budget.
Yep.
That's just planning. That's not definite, right?
That's planning. That's
Okay.
their assumption right now. I'm
Yes.
talking about assumptions. When they were creating the budget, these were the assumptions they went
Correct.
with.
Thank you.
And then they do have CARES money, and CARES Act carryover will be spent on the unknown COVID-related items. They have, I think, through the end of at least the calendar year to spend more money. So it goes into the next fiscal year. And a couple of other things, and that also pertains to the high school. And for professional development had been essentially cut out last year because they were doing a lot of the training through technology courses or courses that were available in technology or online. And also they had trained some staff members to help some of the other teachers, or some staff members, meaning teachers, to help some of the other teachers with new areas and remote teaching. So, and that pertained to both the CPS and the high school. And then also they did go back, and in their zero-based budget process, they really did go back and look at every piece of software that's available and how much is used in the K through 8, how much is used at the high school, and it appears as though they've changed the not the ownership of it, but the management of the software. And it's going to be centralized through the teaching and learning department. So those were a couple of assumptions and background information. And then just a couple of highlights in the report itself in the discussion. CPS, the capital plan, they are still earmarked for $900,000, give or take a little bit, but it hasn't really, they're not quite sure how that's going to play out. They're still working with that. Their numbers are still a little bit squishy. And then also one other highlight from the elementary school, what they're noticing is at the pre-K and at the elementary school, the numbers are going down. Student numbers are going down. So that is something that was brought up at the meeting. And in the middle school and at the district level, they're still fine. There's still, small growth perhaps, but not much. They did have the school calendar for next year was also discussed. And then one last note about CPS is that early retirement. And I just, this is one of the pages from the report. And I just wanted to show you the projected savings due to early retirement in FY22 is approximately $739,000. And the point that Jared was making is that having this early retirement program is saving the schools millions of dollars. And he said it quite literally, it's millions of dollars. Moving on to the high school really quickly. At the high school, here again, their report is right online at the school committee website. And they noted, I want to try to stay away from that. Okay, they probably will have a surplus in their funding. And what they plan to do is they will, two big areas that they do. They prepay tuitions in terms of what they can do, what they're allowed to do legally. And then also they probably will move, if they have extra funds, and the number came out at like 300,000, I think. They would move that to the E&D, but in moving it to the E&D, they have to take 300,000 out of, I'm giving you this as an example, they have to take $300,000 out of the E&D and put it into a stabilization fund. So they are trying to save the stable, they are trying to save funds in a stabilization fund. And what is the case is that while if we have a stabilization fund, we have to go to town meeting in order to use the funds, to get the funds out. The school committee does not. The school committee can manage their own stabilization fund. They do not have to go to town meeting to use those funds. One thing that came up was that Jared also made a very strong statement about this, which is healthcare coverage for retired faculty members or retirees. He said it is, and I quote this, the fastest growing expenditure over the next decade.
Yeah.
Healthcare coverage for retirees.
In the budget, it's interesting when you look at that line item, it's up 12.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Does that come under OPEB?
No.
That's not.
No, it's healthcare coverage.
Current employee healthcare, not post-employee.
Both.
You have current, and then you have retirees.
Yeah, John. He has the accrual. He shows in his line item, he shows an expense for both components, and they're both up, I think, around 12.5%. You're right. Over time, that feeds into OPEB, but he's actually booking a current year accrual as well.
Right. They do have that in one of the charts. One of the things I wanted to mention about the high school, and then I'll be quiet, is cost savings, where they are finding cost savings at the high school. And what they're finding are special education tuitions are going down because they have expanded the special education offerings at the schools. And so the special education tuitions were down between that and the circuit breaker offset. Their tuitions were down 12.27%, which is a good thing. The debt that they pay, the service debt that they're paying is now starting to come down a little bit because they peaked with the high school. And so that is coming down. And the savings there were almost like $160,000. And then the other one I wanted to mention are the charter and school choice. And apparently they have four students in other schools. This year, they've saved 70.91% minus, so it's like a minus $81.6 thousand because only one person now is going to a charter school. So I just wanted to highlight those as some of the cost savings they have, and that's it.
Dee, I'm really glad.
Somebody did ask about the OPEB, and my notes, and I'm just looking at my notes right here. They're still working on the details of OPEB. They don't have that number finalized yet.
Right.
Okay, I'm really glad you brought up the fact that the schools are saving a significant amount of money about bringing SPED in-house and the early retirement for teachers who want it. The stabilization fund troubles me a little bit because if the schools are saving money, or let's just say that they have a budget, but they didn't need everything that the town voted, and they decide to keep that money instead of giving it back to the town, which is basically what they're doing.
This is the high school.
I know. So they're keeping the money instead of giving it back to the town, and they're using it as their own stabilization fund to offset future capital expenses, I guess.
I do not believe that they can give it back to the town.
Why not?
No.
Because it's a regional system.
Why couldn't they give it back to both?
They can
I
give
think
it back.
that they have to balance their budgets somehow.
Yeah, I think,
And
Actually,
right.
Carrie might know.
Have to give it back.
Yeah,
I
so
remember something like that at the meeting, but I can't
Okay,
remember
Carrie.
exactly what it was. There's a reason that it can't go back to the town.
Okay, maybe that's true. Carrie, do you know?
So they can keep up to 5% in their excess and deficiency. Any certified over 5% needs to come back to the town. However, there was discussion about the stabilization fund. So they apparently do have the authority to create a stabilization fund that they could have over and above their excess and deficiency.
All of this.
So they're not required. They could, they could give it back to the town, right?
Well, it's not necessarily in their best interest to do it. If they have needs that aren't being met within the budget, but 1 year is a good year, then it's like the town setting up a stabilization fund.
Yeah, but the town, and as you pointed out, when the town sets up a stabilization fund, it requires the town voters to authorize the spending of that stabilization fund.
I think another way to look at this is they have received money for the CARES Act. And they've been, and they've had opportunities, they have a significant amount of money for that. And so this is kind of a year that I don't want to use it as a barometer necessarily for them, because they could use the CARES Act funds to cover some of their other costs that went on. And maybe that was the reason why they had, this extra money. But I think it's in their best interest to use the money however they can. Because if they give it back, Carrie, you can explain this probably better than I can. If they give it back, they have to give it back to the two towns. And then it's apportioned however. Do you know how that works?
Sure. If they're returning, they have to return it proportionally.
So it's not like our town would get the $300,000.
This was discussed when the high school came with their budget. They discussed the notion of looking into creating a stabilization fund. We all nodded our heads and agreed it was a good idea, I think, and nobody really questioned this when they.
I'm not questioning it now.
Sorry?
I'm questioning it now.
I understand that. I'm just saying that this is something they were pretty open about and transparent when they came to us.
Yep, and they already have this stabilization fund established from in the 1990s.
Was there any money in it? Was there any money in it?
No.
I don't know if there's any money in it now.
There's nothing.
There was nothing in it.
But they have a stabilization fund available to them.
They've used it before.
There was a file cabinet ready to put money in, but there was no money in it.
One of the things is they need $900,000 to pave the streets, right? To pave the roads there. And they don't have that, and it's not in their line, they're not looking at it.
I understand, but they could come to the town for that, which they have come to the town for that. I think they've come a few times, actually. So the way the CPS would need to come is they'd need to come to the town and say, we need money for capital, and the town would
CPS, and I don't think it's a good comparison to look at how CPS works and how the region works.
Well, I disagree because it's still taxpayer money. So the high schools are spending taxpayer money, and the elementary schools are spending taxpayer money. And if they got more than they needed, for them to keep that and say, well, we're going to spend it the way we want to without coming back to you and asking you, do you agree we should pave our roads or do whatever they want to do? I would say that I would rather have it come back to the taxpayers and the taxpayers decide. Because when we approved their budget, we thought they needed that money for their operating, and now we find out, well, no, they didn't actually. They didn't need all that money for their operating.
Well, Mary, if memory serves me, what happened was during the last fiscal year, because of the pandemic, costs in a number of areas went down. Costs in other areas went up, and the CARES money took care of offsetting a lot of those costs. So the cost savings that occurred in areas that they weren't expecting, that's the money that in essence they're banking for the future year. And I think the way it was explained, if memory serves me, is in essence, if they gave the money back, they just have to simply come back again the following year and ask for it as well.
That's right.
all.
That's right.
I'm not defending it. It's just, that was the conversation we had.
You're right. That is.
And I agree with Mary. The money should come back, and the town should decide, the budget process should decide what the next go-around is.
Well, isn't that up to the school committee?
No.
Isn't that up to the school committee?
No, isn't that up to us as representatives of the taxpayers?
I agree with
Do we
you.
just want to pay money? I mean, that's like asking me to pay tuition, and then, oh, that really wasn't the amount of money needed for that education, but they kept it, and so then next year they ask me for tuition. I mean, it defeats the purpose of us trying to manage the budgets. I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask this group was, do we ever ask the town to cut the tax rate? Do we ever ask the departments? I mean, I've worked in industry for 40 years, and there are times that we're told to cut 5% from the budgets. Does anybody ever do that in the town?
The town did that last year.
Well, great. Then thank you. Now I got an answer.
The budgets were cut back in the recession.
Yeah.
Recession last year?
No.
2009,
2008, 2009.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, right.
But I think maybe what this is an entrance for would be a conversation between the finance committee and the school committee. To hear what their position is on this.
It's taxpayer money. Don't get me wrong, right? But all I'm saying is they explained it to us. Maybe it didn't occur to us to ask at the time.
Right.
But they were pretty transparent about what they were doing. Right? And I completely agree with you.
But we haven't seen the amount.
If we want it back, we should at least ask for it because it's our right. The school committee, it's within their purview to say, well, thanks for letting us know, but we're not interested, right? And that's a separate discussion. But I do think it's within our purview to ask.
Yeah.
And Parashar, we don't know the amount. It was a concept. So I don't think we passed on it or said it was okay or anything else. I don't think that. I asked a question about it at the school committee meeting. So I don't feel that they think they have some assent from us on that.
I thought Jared gave us an estimate of 700,000, 750. Am I making that up?
Yeah.
I don't believe I've seen it. They don't know yet.
Well, in the prior budget year, I believe that they had a fair amount of funds that they were able to replenish their food service budget.
Yes.
They were able to fix their
they had a
revolving
surplus,
fund for athletics. There are a number of places where they were able to squirrel away funds because they did have more money than they were expected to spend.
Right.
And so they were able to bring their E&D up to a nice, healthy 5%.
Right.
But that was last year's budget.
We don't know what it is this year. I asked him again on Tuesday, what's your surplus? What's your
for fiscal year 21, Christine?
Yeah.
Or
for fiscal year 21? He doesn't know yet.
I was thinking fiscal year 20 maybe when Dean
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Now, could I make one comment? Because after Dee's extremely detailed picture of the school committee activities, one thing that I think she missed out to tell us, and that is there is a collaborative called EDCO, and that is shutting down.
Good point.
It is in financial distress.
What does it do, Dean? I couldn't figure out what it does.
Well, you go to their website and you still can barely figure out what it is.
I know. I went to the website and I can't tell you.
I couldn't tell either.
I know they do professional development. That's one of the places where they get professional development for the.
But it also offers a variety of kind of like alternative courseware. Some of it is in person, some of it's online. Anyway, it's a collaborative thing among numerous towns. It spans the whole Middlesex and in towards Boston group of communities. It is shutting down. I think we saw the handwriting on the wall with this collaborative, and we took a motion almost a year ago, I think, to exit from the collaborative.
Right.
And so that's an active thing that we've decided to do. But now it's shutting down. Like, we started to see the difficulty and said, let's get out of this while we can get out. So we took a motion to get out, and now it's physically shutting down. There's on the table a $30,000 liability that needs to be taken care of. But more importantly, there was a 9-year lease on a building in Bedford. And individual participating communities, ours being one, may be on the hook for up to $200,000 for the future liability of that 9-year lease, of which only 1 year has been consumed. So they have to figure out whether that liability is whether they can shed the lease, release the, sublease the building, what they can do. But it's a big overhang that needs to be at least mentioned.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the last thing that they talked about, I think, at the meeting. And I was like going online to see what is EDCO.
It is not obvious. It is not obvious what it is.
Okay, let's move on.
Anyway.
Dick, Wade, you have your hand up. Do you want to say?
I just think we need some clarification. I mean, I just don't fully understand what they're capable of doing, what they're not.
Good point.
So before we say, let's bring the money back, what are the rules that guide a stabilization fund? What are the rules that guide the E&D? And if there's money left over, I mean, the rules are established. We didn't make up the rules. The school committee plays by a set of rules, just like we play by a set of rules. Let's know what the rules are. And I don't.
So are you suggesting that we recommend to the school committee that they look at the rules?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, I think I would modify that, Wade. Maybe Carrie can bring us the rules, because the school committee may have a discretion, right? And it may be a matter of whose judgment gets followed. Our judgment that it ought to come back, or the schools committee's judgment that they ought to be able to, put the money into a stabilization fund. So maybe we should educate ourselves on the rules before having the conversation with the school committee.
Carrie, can you do that for us?
I can. I'm going to have to educate myself as well, because I'm not familiar with stabilization funds for regional school districts. So
Thank you.
I'm happy to look into that and report back.
Perfect. Thank
We
you.
need to use those funds to pay for this EDCO liability.
It's a great way to start.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Wade. Dick, do you have any updates that you'd like to share with us?
Are you sure we're done beating the poor old school horse?
No, I don't know. Dick,
We've only been at it for about half an hour here.
Dick, do you have something from your observer report that you can share with us?
That would just be the Recreation Committee.
Yep.
And the news there is that the director, Ryan Kane, has resigned for personal reasons.
Oh, that's
they'll have to do a search for a new recreation director. The one question that keeps coming up from them, and this is more of a question for Carrie, is that they're still trying to figure out how transfer pricing is done, and they wanted to know if we were going to not charge them again this year, and I had to tell them that that's not a decision a finance committee makes, and that's they need to talk to Carrie and the town manager about that.
Yeah. So we, as you may know, all of the enterprise funds and other funds for which the general fund provides services, we do charge them for that. For instance, payroll. We have the payroll staff is paid out of the general fund, but we do payroll for the town. And so the payroll the cost of providing payroll services to the light plant is charged to the light fund. Because of the pandemic and the impact that it has had, particularly on the recreation fund and on Beatty in fiscal 21, the decision was made to not charge them for those indirect costs. And we have yet to make a decision for fiscal 22, but it wouldn't surprise me if we also did not charge them in fiscal 22 as well.
Yeah, and I think that, they're of course very interested in knowing that, but also they're looking for the methodology behind how those charges are calculated so that to help them with their budgeting. Now they want to know if we have X employees, are we going to be charged, X amount for a transfer cost or?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I am well aware of that. I don't think that the methodology that we have is particularly well documented, and it's been one of those projects that has been on the to-do list most of the time that I've been here. I thought we were geared up to make some significant progress over the summer. We attempted to do some work on that, but just because me and my staff had some free time to do it over the summer, not everybody did. So we didn't make as much progress as we had thought, but we would like to get to a point where we have a very well understood, well documented practice of how we charge those indirects to all of the different funds, even to get so far as to put a schedule together and have that signed off prior to the town developing its budget process. So hopefully we will get there.
Okay,
that's it for me.
Thank you, John.
Yes, I will be very quick. The Financial Audit Advisory Committee, I came in at the end of their audit process, and it appears to me that the process was completed uneventfully. So if there's any change to that, I'm sure Carrie would be able to help with it. But so nothing really to report from them. Economic Vitality is talking about a warrant article. It's unclear to me yet what it would entail in terms of money, if anything. So nothing to report on that yet, but definitely one to watch.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Wade.
So Ray and I overlap with the Concord Housing Development Corp. The CPC ask was $233,000 for affordable housing. That's kind of the number that's
great.
That's part of the ask. That's really all I have to report.
Great, thank you, Wade. Phil.
Public Works Commission, not much of financial interest. They are going through their 5-year capital plan, and it seems to be consistent with the last 5 years or so. But anyways, they're doing a good job of managing that. And nothing else to report.
Thank you, Phil. Parashar? You're on mute, Parashar. Parashar, you're on mute.
Okay, so
great.
I've missed the last couple of planning board meetings, but I do have to follow up with them. Mary, you pointed out there may be a couple town warrant articles that may have implications for us. Based on the earlier meetings earlier this year, I didn't think so, but I'll follow up with them and confirm that they don't. They've got articles around tree removal and a few other things like that, but I didn't think there was anything major, but I'll confirm and follow up before our next meeting.
Okay, I don't think they have any direct financial impact, but they might have indirect impacts in that they make affordable housing easier. So I'm going to leave it to you to unroute to see if
the
that's
affordable housing issue's been on their plate for a while, and the types of things they've been considering are zoning changes to allow certain types of affordable housing, duplexes and things like that. I don't know if they'll have big impacts, but I'll follow up and let everybody know.
It would be very hard to quantify, but some of those would make affordable housing easier to get as opposed to building it out, which is what we're doing now. So
yeah, I'll look into it and come back to the committee.
Thank you. Dean.
I've got two portfolios here. One is the Climate Action Advisory Board. Climate Action Advisory Board's been working with an organization called RMI, and they have a 3-pronged strategy to reduce our carbon footprint in the town on the arc of our goals. The first prong is a non-binding resolution that's being promoted at the State House. And that is to I believe to have an electrification strategy. The second prong is looking for a home rule petition, and that would have to come to the town meeting. They're going to go to the select board. They may have gone to the select board at their last meeting this week. I didn't attend. Home rule petition would be to allow us to constrain further gas infrastructure expansion. But that has to go up to the State House, get approved there, and then we have to reaffirm it. It's a multi-step process to allow us to constrain further development of gas infrastructure in the town. And the third prong is any kind of zoning we can do. We were shut down in our attempts to create a building code that would mean all buildings would have to be all electric. In the future, the state said you can't do that. So we're looking at, like maybe changing the PRD zoning so that it requires PRDs to have some electric development or something like that. So it's a three-pronged strategy right now. And the first one's been pushed through and the select board has approved the non-binding resolution. It's a multi-town thing. The second one, we're expected to file a home rule petition that'll go before town meeting. And I don't know what we're doing on zoning. The other piece of my puzzle is the middle school building committee. They've been extremely active. They had a town-wide meeting to just show off where they are. This community forum was held last night, and this morning there was a meeting of the design subcommittee to finalize the proposed design that they will then forward to the full committee for discussion. The finalized building that was approved at the design level, and it needs to be approved at the full committee level, is 143,000 square feet. The cost to construct the building is $79.8 million. And when you add the 25% on top of that for architects, site prep, contingency, et cetera, that's a 25% buffer, which is not the hard cost of physically building the building. It also includes furniture, fixture, and equipment. You're right at $99.8 million. You're right at the edge. So they've done everything they can. The superintendent and everybody that's associated with the educational components of the plan insists everything that has been done is necessary. So there you are, right at the edge of the 80 to 100 that the town had authorized at the last town meeting. The school has, it'll go to the building committee, the full committee, for discussion, but it's unlikely that it will be pared back at that level. It's just,
could the square footage grow?
Well, there's a lot of pressure at the moment to expand the size of the gymnasium. They were able to include an auditorium. An auditorium, if we were in the MSBA program, the MSBA would not approve an auditorium for a middle school. They require you to have a multi-purpose room, whether that's a cafetorium, whether that's a gymnasium, I don't know, whatever. It turns into a multi-purpose room requirement. So we have a full bore auditorium being considered. It's of a modest size. It will hold, we have a 3-class middle school, 6, 7, and 8. It'll hold 1 full class of students with the faculty that are and staff that are associated with that class. So it's about 275 seats. So it'll be a nice, space. But if you want a whole town meeting, that's not happening there. It also includes a gym, which is larger than what would be considered a standard gym for a middle school. A middle school basketball court is 74 feet long, and we are building a high school size basketball court, which is 84 feet long and a little wider, 8 feet wider than so instead of a 6,000 square foot gym, we're building a 7,000 square foot gym. But there's a lot of pressure in town to build a double-sized gym. So you could have 2 basketball courts going crossways. So they've received what they call dozens of letters from people who are writing in saying we need a much larger gym than what you're proposing. So we're at the very limits of what the town has considered, and that's where we are.
Do you know what the double-sized gym would cost incrementally?
They do have the numbers. I believe the gym we're at is about 7. There's two tiers above that. There's one at I believe is at like 11,000 square feet, and the next one above that is 16,000 square feet. Don't quote me. I'm as close to this as anybody, but I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. And if you want to run the numbers, it's $555 a square foot. So just use your calculator and you can get the number.
Does the 100 million number right now include the sustainability features?
It does. The sustainability is considered to be about 1% overall in terms of the extra added cost for the sorts of things that we're asking for. We're asking for the building to be all electric. So it's going to be like a heat pump, probably an air source heat pump type of system. All fixtures will be electric. That includes all the ranges in the or stoves in the kitchen, and everything will be all electric. And it'll have a roof that's been designed to hold the weight of a set of PV arrays, and all of the infrastructure will be included to add them in if CMLP can negotiate a way to get them on there. But it's going to be ready for those at the 100 million, but it does not include those at the 100 million. They'll also have infrastructure in the ground to allow for canopies in the parking lot to be built, but they will not build them for the 100 million. That'll have to be something that maybe CMLP again builds for them. But all of the conduit will be there for EV charging of cars and for the construction of PV canopies on the parking lot. That will be included. So yeah, so all of that stuff is included in the 100 million. We're really at the very edge. There were some serious voices at the design committee meeting level that said, can we please just dial this back by 2 to 5%, come in at 95 to 98 million, in order that in the event that anything happens, our estimate of $555 a square foot is too low, or we run into something that we absolutely have to fix or whatever, that 2% would give us a buffer not to end up in huge amounts of value engineering in the back end. And that was resisted, and we are at the absolute limits of the budget.
When you say resisted, Dean, who resisted by who?
The superintendent made a very passionate defense of every space that was being discussed. There were numerous spaces that were being discussed at the design level. This is not a scheduled space. There is no program that uses this space on a scheduled basis. Or could this space, which is this large, could be brought to a smaller scale? And every time any of those spaces was brought up, there were reasons given why it was critical for student independence, for student curiosity, for community building. There were solid reasons. I'm not saying they weren't. They were there, but there was just no give.
I know when they were here, they talked about trade-offs quite a bit. I remember the architect, Kristen Olson from, I forget the name of the firm, was talking about there would need to be trade-offs made. So what trade-offs were made?
So I believe that it was at 144,000 square feet, maybe a month ago or so. And we're at 143 now. So there was 1,000 square feet found. But in the finding of that, they had to figure out how to build about a 5,000 square foot auditorium that hadn't been included in any of the earlier planning. And they had to add an extra 1,000 square feet because they felt that a high school sized basketball court was more appropriate than a junior high school sized basketball court. So they wanted another 1,000 square feet in the gymnasium space. So that's about 6,000 square feet they had to find. And what happened was they cut a few classrooms for world language. They went from like 7 down to 5. They cut an art room. They cut a music room. In other words, there were rooms that were cut from the program so they could build these other rooms. So it net, you got 1,000 square feet off the thing, but it's pretty much the same thing with a different set of components, with different priorities.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Any other questions for Dean?
That's where we are.
This is an important project. Does anybody have any questions for Dean? Okay, thanks, Dean.
Yep.
Lois?
Yeah, I'll be quick. The Minuteman Tech has had 2 meetings since our last meeting, or since the last time I reported on them. The one that was of the most interest to us was January 26th. They approved their budget. They approved a budget with a 2.4% increase over fiscal year 21. In order to reduce the amount of the assessments they'll be looking for from the towns, they used $540,000 from their E&D fund. And it, passed unanimously. I think the total budget, 27 million, I think that's the number. I can't read my handwriting. It was a long time ago. Anyway, the budget was approved unanimously. And then there was I don't know what Concord's piece of that is, because obviously that doesn't get discussed in the general meeting. And they had another meeting on February 9th that really had not anything that had any financial impact on us directly. They were talking mostly about moving back to in-person schooling and dealing with certain other adjustments. They're having an incredible success with enrollment. They are now, it's a very cohesive board. They work together very well, and they're sort of commiserating with each other. They didn't build an even bigger school when they built the new school, because they're going to be turning students away because there's so much interest in Minuteman. So there's a general feeling that things are going well there, and that they've been managing the pandemic very well. And but financially, the only thing that was of particular interest to us as one of the schools in the region was the approval of the budget and that 2.4% increase in the budget. And that's all I've got.
So Lois, did you get any sense of how much E&D is left after they take 540,000 out of the?
No, I'd have to go back and look at my notes from a prior meeting when they talked about the total amount. No, I don't know how much they have left.
Not that important. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Lois. Greg?
Board of Health didn't meet this month. Nothing really significant for the financial impact anyway. I just would also like to say at PSA, they are doing a great job, especially with all the schools and everything going on in town. So props to them.
Thank you, Greg. Andrea?
Council on Aging, really not much, nothing really pertinent to the Finance Committee right now. A lot of talk about the vaccine rollout, the initial clinic that was set up by the town at Harvey Willer went beautifully. 100 people got their shots, and that was it. No more, as of now. Of interest was the reaction. There's some, the continued proposal, despite the Council on Aging's objection to it, to have senior housing on the StarMet site, or a senior center, which they just don't want. It's for numerous reasons. Another thing that came up was just a side note on the Junction Village project. It was a point of interest was brought up that I hadn't heard before. The access to the project is not the road. The town the town would have to pay to make the road a real road to handle the traffic and sidewalks. Apparently the road that goes in there is just a narrow, it's not meant for the project that's going in there. And that would be something that the town would have to take on financially. And there's still a lot of concern about the transportation and no answers. They're just not getting any answers to it.
Transportation to where?
From the project.
Yep.
To other places in town.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And that's about it.
Good. Thank you. Kathy?
Since I last reported, the Board of Assessors has had 2 meetings. They're in their busy season right now, reviewing applications for abatements. And so they're on a pretty rigorous schedule, but nothing that should be of any concern to us at the Finance Committee. The Retirement Committee met this month, actually last week. Each month they review the performance of the portfolio. Things are on track. There was one conversation, and Mary, I did write to you about this, that piqued my interest. There was a discussion, and this was somewhat tangential, so it wasn't right focused on the Retirement Committee itself and the performance of the portfolio, but rather that with the equal pay law that was put into effect in 2019, there are reviews of equal pay for equal work. And so some salaries, as a result, get adjusted upward. No one's salary gets adjusted downward. And so there was a conversation about, what kind of impact that might have on retirement benefits. But it made me think, and I did ask a question, again, because I hadn't heard this before, as to whether the town has reviewed all of the salaries. Have the schools reviewed the salaries? Is there, are we just scratching the surface, or is there going to be more that comes out of a financial nature? And I believe, and I believe it was Carrie, and I think she's on this call, who said that there is a process going on in the town to review salaries.
Carrie, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, there is a process. It's been ongoing for close to a year now, because the Equal Pay Act went into effect last July, I believe is what we agreed on, even though Kathy will recall, I remember thinking it's been out longer than that, but I guess not. But, the town, as part of its budget process, has a salary reserve account, and that's we set aside a certain amount out of the budget each year to settle contracts and make any miscellaneous adjustments that might come up. And I don't think, based on what I've seen to date, that we would see any significant salary adjustments, but there definitely have been a handful of, fairly modest salary adjustments that have been made to date that I'm aware of. So it is an ongoing process. It is very complicated. Anybody who might be involved in this in their, in their own career, it's very difficult. Under the law, it doesn't seem to matter how much experience somebody has or what other experiences they might have. It really has to do with paying people who are in the same position classification, the same. And it's very complicated.
But I think what you're saying is that for the town anyway, we're not exposed to any adjustments because we have the salary reserve account. Is that accurate?
Yes, we would be looking to fund any adjustments that need to be made from the already budgeted salary reserve account.
Okay. We don't know about the schools or the enterprise funds if this were to also impact them, though. Is that?
They're certainly subject to the law.
Right.
Right.
One thing, Kathy, is that I remember a few years ago at town meeting, the assessors have something called an overlay, and the town was able to use some of that money to pay for something. And I'm sorry that my memory is so poor on this, but
No problem.
But to me, there was money someplace that we could use if we needed it. Okay. Have you heard that come up at all as far as an overlay that the assessors have that they could in fact use to lower the property tax rate if they needed to?
I have not heard. I have not heard that. I haven't heard the term. As I said, that they're just right now in their. Again, this is new to me, but it seems like it's a busy season for all the departments here in the town.
Okay.
Mary, do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah.
Comment on that? So the town has an overlay account that is funded each year, and the purpose of that is to set aside money for any abatements that might be granted by the Board of Assessors through the year. So that money can accumulate.
Yep.
And it can get to the point where the board, it is under the control of the Board of Assessors. So when they deem that they have a surplus, it's called overlay surplus, and they can vote to release it. And it would, it either can be released and reappropriated or released and fall to free cash. So 3 years ago, they voted to release $1.5 million.
That's it. Yep.
That amount was for technology, for specific technology projects.
That's right. Okay, good.
Yeah. And so they're, not to go off on a tangent, but if we get to the point where the senior means tax exemption is not, the new legislation is not authorized, the town would like to continue with that in fiscal 22, and one source of funds for that, so it's not, reducing anybody's budget or raising property taxes further, would be to ask the assessors to release a certain amount to fund that senior means tax exemption.
Great. Thank you.
It's probably not anything that you'll hear talked about at the Board of Assessors meeting because they don't like to talk about it.
I wonder why. Thank you, Carrie. Kathy, do you have anything else that you'd like to say? Or
no, that's it.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving right along. We have the CFO report. Carrie, do you have anything more you'd like to say to us?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Good. Okay, just to remind everybody, we don't have a meeting on March 18th. Our next meeting is March 25th. We have a whole month off. Wow. So thank you very much. I would entertain a motion. Does anybody have anything we should be talking about that I'm not talking about?
Mary, is there any members of the public?
Yeah, there are 2 members of the public.
Yeah, are there any citizen comments that we would like, anybody would like to speak up?
Make a motion to adjourn then.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Good. I'll go around and have a roll call. Ray Andrews.
Yes.
Myself, Mary Hartman, yes. Christine Reynolds.
Yes.
Dee Ortner.
Yes.
Dick Jameson.
Yes.
John Hickling.
Yes, please.
Wade Rubenstein.
Yes.
Phil Swain.
Yes.
Parashar Patel.
Yes.
Dean Banfield.
Yes.
Lois Lawcock.
Yes.
Greg Gariello.
Yes.
Andrea Zoll.
Yes.
Kathy Coacolo.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. I'll see you next month.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Well,